Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of our exciting webinar that we have. As everyone know, the historic nomination and confirmation hearings of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson that are going through the Senate now. And she brought up the name of the late Constance Mosley Baker, who was the first Black woman to serve at the federal bench. And so today we have 3 of our 8 Black alumni who serve as jurists today to talk about the historical nomination and their experiences as a jurist as a Black woman on the bench. So first we have Judge Wendy Cross of the Hamilton County Court of Common Pleas General Division. We also have Judge Andrea Peoples of the Franklin County Municipal Court. We have Judge Jessica Price Smith of the United States Bankruptcy Court of Northern District of Ohio. And this conversation will be led by Maria Vitullo, who's the director of the Sue J. Henry Center for Pre-Law Education. So go ahead and get started, Maria.
Thank you, Seth. And thank you, judges, for taking the time for us to chat today with you. We have so much to talk to you about, including the recent historic nomination of the first Black woman to the Supreme Court. But first, we'd like to get to know you all a little bit better. You each have unique backgrounds and experiences that have led you to the judicial bench. Some of you have highlighted as part of your journeys the importance of your involvement in Black Greek organizations, among other things. So I'd like to ask each of you to briefly describe your background and career path to becoming a judge, including any experiences that have influenced your career decisions. And Judge Cross, let's begin with you.
All right. Well, let me first say to you, Maria, to my colleagues, and to everyone, all of the Miami alumni, love and honor. And I started out as a civil practitioner. After law school, I was recruited by a law firm in Lexington, Kentucky, where I practiced civil defense. Insurance defense, a lot of civil insurance litigation. I did that for 3 years. I was in the courtroom as a really young lawyer and learning the trade. And then I was recruited by the Department of Justice to serve as an assistant United States attorney. And I served for 10 years as a federal prosecutor, both in the Eastern District of Kentucky, as well as the Southern District of Ohio, which is Cincinnati, which is where I live. And that was really a wonderful experience. I left the U.S. Attorney's Office and opened up my own practice and began practicing defense work. So both federal and state defense work, criminal, civil rights litigation, just a little bit of family law for my clients, and then a little bit of insurance defense, obviously, because that had been my background. And so I did that for about 9 years. I had my own practice. I had my own law firm, and with a law partner and a few associates. And we served the community in that way. I was recruited by the Hamilton County Common Pleas Court to serve as a magistrate in the juvenile division. And so I was a juvenile court magistrate for 8 years, and where I served children and families. And then I decided to run for judge. And now I sit on the Hamilton County Common Pleas Court, handling criminal felony matters, as well as high dollar civil matters. And so that's a little bit of my background and how I got to the bench.
Thank you. Judge Peoples, your background?
Well, my trip to the bench started a little bit before I actually got into law school. I had a godfather that was on the bench. So seeing someone that was close to me able to achieve that meant that I never thought it was something that I couldn't achieve. I went to and learned a lot from Mother Miami, then went to law school at OSU. While I was in law school, I got my first speeding ticket and encountered the difficulties with the court for the average human being who thinks that they're going to speak to the judge and have a conversation and resolve their issues. But it was a lot more complicated than that. There was the pretrial, there was the arraignment, there was a lot more to it. So while I was in law school, I started working as a public defender, thinking that there are a lot of people that are involved in court that are confused about the process and maybe are only there for insignificant reasons. And this is my opportunity to help them make it through that. Had a wonderful time as a public defender, but I also encountered one or two cases too many where I was having a hard time with being the defense attorney. Your responsibility as a defense attorney is to your client and to challenging the constitutionality of all of the things that are being brought before the court. And I remember a particular domestic violence case where a defendant told me, "Thank you so much for resolving this case for me. Now I'm going to go teach her a lesson for opening her mouth." So I went from doing defense work to being a prosecutor. I did that in municipal court, which is misdemeanor court. I did that in juvenile court, and I did that in common pleas. I also did some civil work, and having experienced all those different branches that feed into municipal court, I decided I wanted to be in municipal court because my mother was a social worker and a school teacher and was very hands-on with helping people. And municipal court is basically the people's court. It's where you get the highest traffic and the most varied type of person that you're going to run into that have needs that are legal or might have needs that are social. So with a name like Peoples, I decided to run for the People's Court, and it seemed to work.
Excellent. Thank you. And Judge Price Smith, can you tell us a little bit about your career path?
Certainly. So I started off at Miami, and I got my degree is diplomacy and foreign affairs. And so I did speech, I did political science, and I had some really great professors who were really encouraging of kind of my natural abilities and skills, and actually really kind of helped me as I was making my way through the process of applying to law schools. I went to Ohio Northern University for law school, and as Judge People said, I did a clinic where I had an opportunity to work with individuals in the Lima area who needed assistance. That is where I learned that people are fabulous, but I really like companies. And so I graduated from law school, and my first job was as a law clerk, and I'll get back to that for a second. But I spent the majority of my career prior to becoming a judge as a commercial bankruptcy lawyer. And so I worked with companies. I worked with looking at transactions that put companies together, how they could come apart, how they either would be able to survive through bankruptcy or how they would need to try to cut their losses in bankruptcy. And I loved it. I loved putting together and breaking apart companies. My introduction into bankruptcy actually started with Judge Randolph Baxter, who is the judge that I succeeded. And Judge Baxter was looking for a law clerk, but was particularly looking for a law clerk from Ohio Northern because he had a son at Ohio Northern. And so we reached back to places that we are connected to, and he found me. And so I spent the first year of my career as his judicial law clerk, had a wonderful experience with the bankruptcy court itself, but then that also was the year that the bankruptcy appellate panel was established. And so I got the opportunity to do both bankruptcy trial work as well as bankruptcy appellate work. And again, bankruptcy court is where a lot of people come through. And so we have a lot of contact with a variety of different cases, and you get to learn a lot of different things, different types of companies, different issues that individuals have. And I loved it. And I knew that after I was done getting to the point of being a partner at a law firm, that I wanted to come back and join the bench. And fortuitously, Judge Baxter retired or announced his retirement at the point where I was ready. I had made partner. I had done a lot of work with the various bar associations, going through the ranks with the Cleveland Bar Association through chairing the commercial and bankruptcy group. And so I was recognized as someone who was good at my craft. And the bankruptcy court is an Article I court under the Constitution. And so I am not elected. The position is appointed. And the appointing authority is the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. And so I went through that process successfully the first time. I was appointed to a 14-year term. And then 3 years ago, I had the pleasure of also be appointed to serve on the bankruptcy appellate panel. And so I did 3 years of appeals. I have just completed that. And now I am back to managing just the bankruptcy court docket. So that's how I went from law school to law firm to bankruptcy court. And here I am.
Excellent. Thank you, Judge. which segues us very nicely into our next question. We're lucky enough today to have a panel that represents the judiciary at both the state and federal levels. Judge Price-Smith, you just talked about the process required for you to become a judge, that it's an appointed position. I'm wondering if the other judges could speak to the process for them becoming a judge, whether appointed or elected, and in general, the role and responsibilities of your specific judicial position. So Judge Peoples, we'll start with you. Can you speak to that process?
At the state level municipal court, it is an elected position. I have to say that is the thing I like least about my job is the campaigning and the election part. Most people don't want to know a judge. They think that if they've encountered a judge, they finally got caught with that speeding ticket or something's going wrong in their life. So when you're campaigning, people are not overly excited about talking to judges, particularly since we have limitations on the things that we can say to them. As a judge, you're not allowed to express a personal opinion. So if someone asks you a direct question and you have to fall back on the judicial canons and tell them that you can't answer their question, it makes campaigning on the state level challenging. It's also personal finances or fundraising. And as a judge, you want to be above money and not someone who's influenced by people with money. So it's a bit of a contradiction to have to run for your position and be the person that they can trust to make decisions separate and apart from monetary donations. My specific responsibilities in municipal court are civil cases of a very low $15,000 or less level, which is the general public when they're having conflicts with neighbors or landlord-tenant disputes or evictions. But my criminal docket runs from theft, speeding, domestic violence, menacing by stalking, anything that is punishable by up to a year in jail. But we're also in Franklin County responsible for doing the arraignments for felonies. So I have to set the bonds for murders, rapes, things along those lines. And the only thing I can do is set bond. I'm not given the extra things that we have in municipal court other than bond for determining what happens with those people. No GPS, no pretrial monitoring, no ability to take their passports. So I do deal with felonies initially, but then those are passed off to the common pleas court, and I'll happily pass it off to our common pleas court judge.
Excellent. Judge Cross.
Well, I first want to say I share the sentiment of Judge Peoples in not enjoying campaigning. I enjoy meeting people. I enjoy talking to people, but there are aspects of the campaign trail that I'm an introvert, and that just doesn't align well with how I'm wired. And other thing that she mentioned was raising money. We campaign, but as judges, we're not permitted to ask anyone for money, nor would we want to. So that makes it a little bit challenging in how to navigate that space. So, Judge Peoples talked about her jurisdictional levels. And so I, as a common pleas judge, I handle matters, criminal matters, felony matters, where the person is exposed to imprisonment for 1 year or longer. And so I handle what is typically seen on television in Law and Order and, SVU, Criminal Minds and all that. The trial level that you see on television is usually what you see in my courtroom. So the rapes and the murders and the felonious assaults and things like that. And also we deal with the civil side of it, where the controversy that the amount in controversy is $15,000 or more. And so a lot of medical malpractice cases and large dollar personal injury cases they're the kind of cases I deal with on a regular.
Thank you. And Judge Price-Smith, is there anything you would like to add about your roles and your role and responsibilities as a bankruptcy court judge?
Certainly. So unlike my sisters, I don't handle criminal matters, although I do have matters that will be impacted by state court cases, both criminal and civil. So bankruptcy court, again, is a trial court. We're a division of the district court. Bankruptcy is a federal statute, and it is the purview of the district court, and it comes to the bankruptcy court through a withdrawal of the reference. And what that means is that we are authorized to hear all matters in bankruptcy and then related under core jurisdiction. And so my day-to-day is managing cases filed by individuals or companies, or filed against individuals or companies in the context of bankruptcy, which is the attempt to give an honest debtor a fresh start. So to reorganize their financial obligations. Out of those cases, those bankruptcy cases, there are adversary proceedings, and that's where there's an interface between the bankruptcy court and the state courts. So if it is a criminal matter, what would come to me would be issues of restitution or when there have been fines. If it is a civil matter, what will come to me is whether or not if there has not yet been a disposition, if that case is going to go back to state court, or if the parties prefer that I resolve those issues to determine whether or not there is a claim that would be relevant or discharged in the bankruptcy. What is interesting is the same way that we get the reference can be withdrawn. It is not our financial limits determine what part of the statute an individual or company would file under. So I don't have a statutory limit of what I can handle. But for some cases, if there is an issue that the parties would prefer to have heard by an Article 3 judge, then the reference can be withdrawn, and then that will go back to the district court judge to be heard. And so that is kind of how we interface. The automatic stay is what people mostly know in bankruptcy, which says that when someone files for bankruptcy, everything happening against them, any action against them has to stop. And that is the other place where we come into contact with the state courts and the proceedings that are happening in the state court. I do want to say one additional thing about the process of becoming a judge. I am so thankful I don't need to run, that I don't need to have anybody trying to raise money for me. The process is different in that, again, it is a kind of a nomination and then selection process. But my colleagues didn't talk about this, but it's a very invasive process. The amount of information that you need to turn over about yourself, your family, your finances, where you have lived since the beginning of time, just all the things that go into the investigation of who you are as a person, your character, whether or not there would be potentially any type of conflicts or issues is done. And although I do not have an election, or did not have an election, there was a 2-week period where anybody and everybody was allowed to send in comments about me. And so when I had my interview with the Sixth Circuit, they pulled out a binder of all the people who felt the need to send a letter in about how they felt about me. That can be a little bit of an intimidation factor, because there's no level of control, input, or anything that you have. It's just, here's the open comment period. Anybody who has something to say, we'd like to hear it. And so I think judges have to have a lot of self-confidence and security, because a lot of things can be said about you and you don't respond, because that's not your role. You're there to do justice for all parties regardless. And so you can't let yourself kind of get distracted by the chatter of people wanting to comment on or address your personality, or even how they feel about how you wore your hair today. Those are the things that you just kind of let roll off of your back so that you can do your job and not give even the appearance of any type of bias.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Judge Price-Smith. I'd like to turn now to the historic moment that we're in. As you know, confirmation hearings for Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson began this week. And this is the first time in the history of our country that a Black woman has been nominated to the Supreme Court of the United States. Reflecting on this moment in time, I'd like to ask each of you to describe your thoughts on the significance of this nomination, perhaps what it means to you personally, and what you think Judge Jackson will bring to the court as the next justice if and when confirmed. So Judge Peoples, you are the longest serving judge on our panel, beginning your service, I believe, in 2005. So let's begin with your thoughts on this nomination.
I will tell you first and foremost that I have not really been able to watch because I've been so terrified of what the people that represent my country will do in these hearings. I've been doing sound bites of what's been going on, and I was very proud of, I think I heard Cory Booker saying something that was close to my heart, that he was going to rejoice when she got there, because I think that I mentioned that having a relative who looked like me made me know that this was something I could do. And there was a judge that was on the bench before me who took the time to kind of give me some insights into what I, as a Black woman, would encounter on the bench. So I'm very excited by the process and very hopeful for an outcome where she is the jurist on the bench, because I know if I hadn't seen someone that looked like me being capable of doing it, it would have been another barrier to me being able to do it. Beautiful, brilliant, and looking forward to seeing her do what she's more than capable of doing.
Thank you. Judge Cross.
For me, and I agree, I haven't been glued to the television or watched a whole lot of it for the same reasons. But for me, this is a moment of hope. It really is. Hope for women, hope for people of color, and particularly for hope for young girls of color. When I reflect on what's happening, it's a time that I think that we should be cherish the anticipation that women of color, particularly Black women, will finally be esteemed for their brilliance and admired for their perseverance against insurmountable odds that a lot of times we face, and finally valued for the essence of our being. And so when I see her on television and I hear her answering questions, and I see the poise and the brilliance that she is, I am moved. I'm really moved. And I share the sentiments of Senator Booker, who basically said that when he looks at her sitting in that chair, that no one is going to take away his joy, the joy he feels in his heart, because he knows what it took for her to sit in that chair. And I feel the same way. I feel joy in my heart. The impact of her nomination can be felt by, not only all women, but particularly Black female judges. And I'm just ecstatic about this nomination. So just overjoyed.
Thank you. Judge Price-Smith.
So a couple things. I think that when our institutions look like us, it is a benefit to all of us. And one of the things that has struck me that we don't really talk about a lot is that her name is Ketanji. And when we're talking about representation, it is outstanding that there is a woman, a Black woman, who is poised to become a Supreme Court justice. Because again, we want our children to be able to see themselves in all of our institutions. But the idea of how you're named and what you're named and whether or not you need to change your name or make it more common for people to find you acceptable is changing. You can be authentically who you are as you are and show up and still be acceptable. And I think that that is one of the things that we should take away from this moment. Judge Brown Jackson's story is not one of a person who's kind of persevered and overcome. It's one who came from a middle-class family, who worked hard, who was brilliant, and continued to rise in her chosen career. And oftentimes when we call on particularly African Americans and minority populations to speak about their experience, we're sitting and we're waiting to hear about the tragedies of their life that they have overcome. But our stories are not all based in tragedy. Our stories are as varied as we are as a people. And to see someone who came from hardworking, educated parents who valued education, who continued that trail, it's just another layer to the story. People need to see that Blackness in the United States is not just about struggle. It is about excellence and the continued growth and movement forward of people. And there is an opportunity in this moment to celebrate all that the judge has done to this point, as well as the historic nature of her appointment as just one more example of the way that we as a people continue to strive and just be excellent in our existence.
Wow, I love that. I love that. And I love what you said about it being about growth and movement forward. I think that's so important because despite this historic nomination, we know that women of color continue to face many obstacles and challenges in their legal careers in particular. A few years ago, there was a study on behalf of the American Bar Association's Commission on Women in the Profession that found that women of color reported the highest levels of implicit gender and racial bias in the legal workplace. 65% of women of color reported having to go, quote, above and beyond to get the same recognition as colleagues, and 67% of women of color in that report reported being held to a higher standard than their colleagues. We also know that less than 1% of partnerships in U.S. law firms are held by Black women. And we can go on and on with these types of statistics. But what I'd like to ask each of you is, what has your experience been as a Black woman lawyer and a Black woman judge? And have you faced these sorts of challenges associated with your race and gender? And how have you navigated those types of challenges? Judge Price-Smith, I'm going to start with you because I know that you were the first African-American law partner in your former firm's 90-year history. And so let's start with your thoughts and your experiences as a Black female lawyer and judge.
So law firms are an interesting beast because they are generators of funds. Your value at a law firm is based upon your ability to generate money, and your ability to generate money in theory is tied to how well you represent clients. Except when you are getting clients and you're trying to develop your book of business, it's really about relationships. And so that's where the question, the issue, the ability to succeed kind of starts to get impacted by who you are versus who people think you are. And I had really great mentors that worked with me both inside and out of my firm. And one of the things that was always said to me is make sure that you have a champion, that person who is speaking your name in rooms where you are not present, that person who is saying, hey, this is what this person is capable of. And oftentimes it is hard for women, for African Americans to have that champion because of people's natural tendency to believe that people who look like them, who they presume have a similar background, have more in common with them. And so you're breaking a barrier, you're building relationships inside the firm, you're building relationships outside the firm. And even when you're at your height, when you know you're doing everything that you're supposed to do, when you're being rewarded by the people who know you and know what you're capable of, there can always come that moment where it all feels like it could just be washed away. So I made partner. I was really good at what I did in every court that I was in. I was sitting in a court with all of my documents laid out, prepared to represent a company that my firm represented, that I had done a lot of work for, that had saved them lots of money in some of the largest cases in the United States. And as we prepared for the hearing, the judge came out. Opposing counsel goes, well, we can't start because the other lawyer isn't here. I'm at the table with my documents, with everything out, literally sitting here, and you don't see me? You literally don't see me as a lawyer sitting here. And the judge was like, counsel was right there. They were surprised. I was annoyed. We went forward. But those are the things that happen because there's a presumption that the person they're looking for can't possibly be you. But those are the types of things that you can't take to heart, because if you let every slight that like that get to you, it could break you down. What is interesting about that, and the advantage that that sometimes gives you, is that people presuming that you are not who you are leads them to let their guard down and perhaps say something that they had no business saying in front of you because they presumed that you couldn't possibly be a threat to what it is they're doing. When I joined the bench, I was 38 when I was selected for this position. It was an interesting transition for me. When I first started, there were multiple people who started their arguments with how long they had been practicing or how long they had been before this court, which is fabulous. But I'm the judge, and it's conceivable that you have been doing this longer than I have been a lawyer. I will give you that, but I'm here. And I'm the one who has been charged with making these decisions. So thank you for that information. Now tell me what your argument is. So again, it's those things that you don't kind of respond to, they happen, but that really is the other person's issue, not yours. Because I know who I am, I know what I can do, and I know why I'm sitting where I am.
Thank you. Judge Peoples, your experience as a Black woman lawyer and now judge, and any challenges and how you've navigated those over time.
Well, just as a woman, when I used to write motions for the city, I found that if I wrote my entire name out, there was more likely to be a challenge to the motion. We'd actually have a hearing. When I just went to my initials, AC, my motions went through, things got resolved. So you get challenged, you find your way around them. 17 years ago, when I first took the bench, came from vacation to the bench, had my hair in micro braids, was seated in my bailiff's seat, and an attorney was in the back chambers, having never met me, saying something about, where is this judge? She must be such a diva. She's not even here on time. And everyone else in chambers was looking around going, have you lost your mind? Do you not realize? And he just didn't realize who I was. So when my bailiff came in and apologized for the court reporter being late and asked me if I was ready, I just turned, looked at him, smiled, walked into court. He never came into court. I don't know why, but I think someone else covered his case. So that was 17 years ago when my braids made me not the person that I was. But just this year, I had a Black female prosecutor, and she also had a Black female assistant. And the attorney said something to me about not being able to tell them apart because they both had braids in their hair. So again, I don't make comments, but I did come back the next week with 18-inch twists in my hair, which was the closest I could come to braids without getting an appointment. So there are people that always make assumptions. I've had times when, even amongst my peers, I've tried to get a point across, and I've learned that I can either fight or I can let someone else make the point. I'll give them all my talking points. I will give them my arguments. They make the point, it flies through. If I don't feel like fighting about something, but it's important enough to me, I find a way to get that conveyed. Don't know if that's because I'm a woman. Don't know if that's because I'm Black. Don't know if it's because when I'm actually saying it, I'm just not saying it in a way that they can hear. But you find ways and accommodations, ways to get things done, ways to get things taken care of. We've had a lot of conversation during COVID about microaggressions and things along those lines. I just find it better to be here. I can use my position not only for those types of things, but cultural things. I'm on the Supreme Court Committee for Interpreters, and I'm more conscious of what it's like to not understand a language and have someone try to force you into compliance without giving you all the information that you need. So I am always on it to make sure we have a Spanish interpreter, or any languages that we need. It's still ongoing 17 years ago and a couple months ago, but I'm here.
Thank you. And finally, Judge Cross, your thoughts.
Thank you. I'm the newest member of the bench. And so I've been on the bench since February 2021, so just a little over a year. I don't believe I've had any significant challenges as a judge because of my race. A little bit of pushback, but I always thought that perhaps it's because I'm new. I didn't really see it as because of my gender or because of my race, but as a new judge, attorneys try to, see how far they can go, push the envelope with you, see what your parameters are. But I will tell you, as a lawyer, I did have some of the same experiences that the other two judges have had. When I was doing defense work with the firm, I remember going to a local county courthouse, and I had my suit on and my briefcase, and I was ready for my argument, just like my sister judge here. And the judge just totally ignored me, and I had to, stand, and he listened to the other side, and I was sitting at the table, and then he just began to start ruling. And I said, "Judge, you haven't heard my argument." And he was like, "Oh," and it was just kind of really cavalier about it, like, "Oh, okay, well, go ahead." Um, and of course, at the time, I was the only Black person in the room, and so that was a microaggression. I've also had judges call me honey, and yeah, as if I wasn't a lawyer. They'll say counselor to the male attorneys, but then when it came to me, they would say honey, and it's things like that you know had to contend with. But like my sisters here have said, you have to have thicker skin and just come prepared to do what you were going to do despite that. And so, yeah, that's been our shared experience.
Thank you for sharing all of that, judges. Judge Price-Smith, you talked about the idea of having a champion. Judge Peoples, I believe you talked about the importance of having someone, I think it was your uncle who you said looked, so you saw someone who looked like you do the kind of work you've come to do. So I'd like to turn now to this idea of mentors and people who have influenced you. During her speech accepting President Biden's nomination and in her opening statement during the Senate confirmation hearings, Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson talked about the lawyers and judges who have inspired her, including her own father, Justice Breyer, for whom she clerked, and Judge Constance Baker Motley, who was the first Black woman to ever serve on the federal bench. And so to each of you, I'd like to ask who you have looked up to and who has most influenced your decision to become a lawyer and judge. Why don't we send that to Judge Price-Smith first?
So as the judge said as she was speaking, my parents are wonderful. My parents are the people who always made it clear to me that whatever it was that I wanted to do, I would be able to do. They have always been supportive of me. They have always been there and championing the various things that I thought that I wanted to do. I mean, my poor mother has driven to states with me to do hearings just so I wouldn't be by myself. So, I mean, my family is absolutely wonderful. I always knew that I wanted to be a lawyer. I knew I wanted to be a partner at a law firm. It was really my work with Judge Baxter that opened up the possibility of being a judge to me. And so I will credit him with that. One of the judges who I consider a mentor who served on the bench with me, who has since retired, was a judge by the name of Patty Morgenstern Claren. And Judge Morgenstern Claren was a marvel and was on the bench. She is still with us. And what I learned from her is the ability to kind of integrate my whole self into what it is that I do. I am a mom, I am a judge, I am a community member. All of those things impact who I am and how I show up. And one of her real passions was making sure that lawyers, in particular lawyers in practice by themselves, had a plan for if something happened to them. She was really big on mental health. She was really big on making sure that the professionals were okay, had plans because that impacted their clients. And what I learned from her is sometimes we feel like, I'm coming here. This is the thing I'm coming here to do, and we don't always look outside and look around to see the other things. And she taught me that it was okay for a judge to be like, I am concerned about this person. I am concerned that the way that this lawyer is appearing is not how they have been appearing before. Perhaps there needs to be some sort of intervention. And having learned that lesson from her, that's not something you really, I don't think, see like from judges on TV. But having that additional layer of allowing yourself to be yourself has resulted in my time on the bench in recognizing when people were legitimately in trouble and calling that attention in a private way so that they could get help. And I think that we don't often talk about how judges are in a position to help in that way. And so the judges who have come before me, who have allowed me to understand and learn that part of our profession, I have really appreciated.
Thank you. Judge Peoples, who has inspired you?
I have to go back to my parents. I mean, my mom is the one that the social worker and the teacher is a lot of what comes out when I'm in court, meeting someone at the level that they are, trying to fix things. My father used to torture me when I was young. He used to give me a list of words and expect me to break down the etymology and be able to use it in a sentence. And that began my love of language and wanting to be able to communicate in different ways. So you have to have that family base to keep coming back to, because when you're in law school and everything falls apart, you go to your sister. When you're running for office and you don't know what to wear, or you need another $1,000, you go back to your family. Now, I've been lucky enough to, I clerked for Yvette McGee Brown, who was the first Black woman appointed to the Supreme Court, the Ohio Supreme Court, when she was a domestic relations court judge. And I also was a prosecutor in the courtroom of Janet Jackson, who was the first Black woman on the Franklin County Municipal Court bench. So they were always there as ways that I could look at the different ways that they reacted to things on the bench and to inspire me to do that. But it still always comes back to my parents. I mean, I'm going to hopefully be running again, and I'm the first person I'm going to call is my dad. Hey, how do we plan this? What is the support? I'm a daddy's girl still. Daddy, what are we going to do here? And he's still going to challenge me if I'm not using one of those words from his etymology chart. So it still, for me, comes back basically to family. And then fortunately, some women that have done it before me and done it well.
Judge, I just want to say my father was a banker, and so it's not a huge surprise that I am a bankruptcy judge.
That's great. Judge Cross, the same question. Who have you looked up to and who has most influenced your career as a lawyer and judge?
Well, certainly my mom. I come from a single parent home, and certainly my mom has been my champion all through my life and still is. But I would say that the reason I became a lawyer was primarily because of my grandparents. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents when I was young because my mom was a single parent and oftentimes worked two jobs. And so grandparents, that takes a village. Grandparents were always there as that safety net to take care of me and my sisters. And so I spent a lot of time with them. And my grandparents lived in and through the segregated South, and and lived through Jim Crow and all of that. And I used to hear their accounts and their experiences of what they endured and lived through. And I began at a really early age listening to them and knowing that I wanted to be a voice for other people because they didn't have a voice. And they were very vocal to me about the fact that, you know, they didn't have a voice back then. And so I wanted to be a lawyer so that I could give voice to other people. And that's really why I became a lawyer. And I will tell you that I watched countless episodes of Perry Mason with my grandparents because that's what they love to watch. And I just knew I was going to be the Black female version of Perry Mason because, you know, that's what I saw. But when I actually graduated law school and went to this firm after law school where I practiced insurance defense, they paired me. I was the first African-American female in the firm, in the history of the firm in 1992. And I was paired with the first female partner of the firm. And this woman, I credit so much of my career to because she poured everything she knew into me. And she was not a woman of color, but she took me under her wing and she made me do things that my contemporaries didn't have the opportunity to do. She made me go into court and argue very complex issues and summary judgment motions and gave me that opportunity. And I just, and then she strategized with me on cases, and just getting the benefit of her knowledge and her wisdom and her experience really paved the way for me to, be successful in the career of law. And then finally, one of my sorors from Miami University, the sisterhood I belong to, Delta Sigma Theta sorority. One of my older sisters in the sorority ahead of me went into law and was the first Black female partner at her firm in Cincinnati. And she also took me under her wing. And, even to this day, when Judge Peoples calls her dad, I call mine a Jefferson, a Jones Jefferson, because our sisterhood is very strong, and she just really helped me and taught me a lot. So I would credit those three people in my life.
Fantastic. Thank you. I know Mina, so that doesn't surprise me one bit.
Uh-huh.
The last two questions I have for tonight really relate to the advice that you can impart to the next generation. We have a lot of listeners who are, just starting to think about being a lawyer, maybe, or maybe they're currently in law school or just starting out in their legal careers. And so my first question is a more general one. And then we have a question from one of our viewers that relates more to young women of color. But I'd like to start with you, Judge Peoples. What advice would you give students and young lawyers who aspire to be a judge one day?
Try your very best to get exposure to a little bit of everything. Being a judge is very political. You have to be selected by your party to be able to run. And sometimes they will want to put you in a position that you're not suited. So if you want to be a judge, make sure you're going to be a judge in a field that you can commit to, that there's something in your heart that you want to accomplish there. So go to juvenile, spend time in juvenile court, go to common pleas, observe the workings, not just of the trials, but of the day-to-day, so that if that's something you want to do, then you're going to have to fight for it. And you need it to be something that you want to fight for. So the more exposure you can get, that is the best thing in the world that you could do to help you make that decision.
Thank you. Judge Price-Smith?
So for those who have been following the confirmation hearings and other confirmation hearings that have happened through the years, one common thing that exists that I don't think we necessarily talked about a lot is that a lot of federal judges were federal law clerks. You have an opportunity to be a law clerk, in part because of your grades. And so in all you do, you should do your very best. But look at what you need to do and where you need to be to apply for judicial clerkship positions. Just the Beginnings Foundation is an organization out of Chicago that works to pair students with opportunities to clerk with judges. That is something that I would commend to young lawyers, in particular young minority lawyers, um, because that is where you get introduced to the people who you someday want to replace. You are in chambers with them, you are learning from them, they are introducing you to their colleagues, and that is the moment in time in your career where you have access to what the judiciary looks like from the inside without actually being a judge. So look at that as an opportunity for you to participate in this system. And again, in all things, do your absolute best. And it is, as Judge People said, you have to figure out what works for you. I would not work in juvenile court. I would not work as a criminal lawyer. I was an outstanding commercial bankruptcy lawyer. However, that is where my passion is. I love numbers. I love understanding financial situations. I love the fact that I am able to help people when they are faced with financial difficulties see the light and the ability to restart their lives. That's my thing. You have to find your thing.
Thank you. And Judge Cross, what advice would you give to students or young lawyers who might aspire to be a judge one day?
Well, first of all, I would say, don't aspire to be a judge for the sake of just being a judge, because this is a calling. Really, it is a calling, and it's the difference between a good judge and a not so good judge. And so, just like my sisters have said, you have to know what your passions and your values and your why is, and what you are good at, what your skill set is, in order to determine what type of judge you want to be. But I oftentimes hear young lawyers say, "Well, I want to be a judge," and I ask them why, and they really don't have a why. And I tell them this is a calling, really, because it's not as easy as it looks. And I'm learning that as a new judge, been on the bench only a year, and I've been surprised by some of the uh, challenges that come along with this mantle, really. Um, but network, I don't think I have any more to add than what has already been said, but, network and expand your skill set, because while, one of us does U.S. bankruptcy, and that's kind of specialized, I would guess that her skill set is very expansive, though. All right. And same with Judge Peoples. Although she's doing misdemeanor offenses in municipal court, her skill set is expansive. So I would encourage young lawyers to expand your skill set.
Thank you. And then our last question of the night really has to do with, they're from our audience members who have questions around advice that you would give young women of color in particular. And so our first question from our audience member is, what would you recommend is the most important thing for a young woman of color to do to prepare herself for the competition they will face in the world of law or whatever career track they will take? And then a related question to that is, what kind of professional organizations are there to support Black female judges as mentors and sounding boards? Let's start with Judge Price Smith. Why don't you start with that one, and then we'll close out with Judge Cross and Judge Peoples.
So law is very competitive. But what you need to understand is that your greatest competitor is yourself. You are the person who you are striving to continue to beat. You today need to be better than you yesterday. As Judge Cross said, you need to expand beyond what you even thought you were capable of. And so that's the first thing I would say. If you get caught up with trying to compete against and compare yourself to some other person, you've limited yourself by what they're capable of. Be you, be the best version of you, and keep pushing that forward. And so that's the first thing I would have to say, because really, this is about you. This is about your life, about what you want to be and what you want to accomplish. And so you need to have a strong sense of who you are, what you want, and then just go get it. In terms of organizations, I know there's a newly formed Black Judges Association in Ohio. I know that there is a national women's judges group. I don't know that there's specifically a Black women judges group. I will say, I think we just happen to find each other, and we really like each other. And so we are there for one another. Um, you know, one of the things that people always say is like being a judge, and particularly in the bankruptcy group, being a bankruptcy judge is really one of the best jobs you can ever have, because we are here for one another. This is who we are. We're a very small community. I think there's 350 of us right now. And so you keep seeing the same people over and over again. And so you build those relationships, you build that community. So although there is not a particular organization that kind of encompasses us all, I feel like we are all here for one another.
Thank you. Judge Cross, would you like to take this next? What you would recommend to a young woman of color to prepare themselves for a career in law?
I just want to applaud the answer that Judge Price Smith gave. That's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to jump up and say, yes, that's right, because that's exactly what I was thinking. The other thing is to surround yourself around people that make you better, and that's your network. And who you decide to align yourself with. You don't need to be the smartest person in the room. No. They say if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. Mm-hmm. So you need to just surround yourselves, through mentorship, through networking of people that can, with the experience and the training and the background that can help you get to where you're trying to go.
Thank you. And then finally, Judge Peoples, your final thoughts as we close out the session on your advice to young women of color preparing to enter a career in law.
Well, the first thing I need to do is echo, if you're the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room. If you have passed the LSATs and you have been admitted to a law school, you are obviously bright enough to do this. Have faith in yourself, but understand it's a whole different way of getting through your day and getting through your testing. I used to drink Mountain Dew like water when it came time for testing when I was an undergrad. But when you are in law school, self-care is very, very important, because you're on 10 24/7. And your study group, they may not seem all that important to you when you first get started, but you need to make sure you're not the smartest person in the room, and that your study group is diverse, because that is what opened my mind to a lot of concepts I was having a hard time with in law school. I don't want to hear about the fertile octogenarian when I'm thinking about criminal law, but if you have that study group that pushes you, that lets you know that you're not the smartest person in the group and that you need to take that next step, then that's all you need. You need faith in yourself, and you need to surround yourself with people that challenge you, and you need to take care of yourself. Mountain Dew, no-dos, not a good idea. Sleep, rest, alternative exercise are ways of doing things, a good idea. And as far as groups, there's also the John Mercer Langston Bar Association. I know that they've been willing to pair up with non-lawyers, people that are interested in being lawyers, just to get them some more exposure to different areas of the practice. So that's another group you might look at if you're looking at going into law school and want to talk to someone that can give you some real world experience.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, judges. This has been great. Thanks for all the fantastic advice. and I know our listeners have enjoyed it. I just want to say it's been a real honor for me to hear your stories and to moderate this panel tonight. So thank you so much for being with us. We are just about out of time, so I'm going to turn it back over to Seth, who will conclude our event. Thank you so much.
Yes, and I share the same sentiment. Just you're like, wow, just all this stories and information being shared. I'm just glad just to be in the virtual room with y'all today, and I thank Maria for doing a masterful job of moderating today this wonderful discussion. And thank you everybody that has watched this. You can also look at many of our webinars that we put on. This is our part 2. We had a previous discussion with some of our Black alumni judges last year. So thank you again for watching, and love and honor.
Love and honor.